Hello and welcome to episode 98 of Trash to Track. Now, in this episode, we're going to be looking at this Oxford Rail Southern Radial tank loco that I picked up from Trains for You. Now, this was a brand new model, and they tested it for somebody that wanted to buy it, and it didn't work. So we're just going to have a quick look at the paperwork here. It shows you body removal, lubrication, etc. I've got a DCC fit this model, so that might be a challenge considering there looks to be very little room. But yeah, this was a brand new model, and when they went to test it, it didn't work. And that explains why it's in some bits and pieces, because they took it apart to see what was wrong with it. And I'll come to that in a moment. But there's the chassis, the base keeper plate there. There's an open detail pack with the brake rigging, etc. in. A couple of screws that we'll need. Try and get that one out there. And then the loco itself is in the blister pack. Now I've got to be careful with this because the wheels are obviously loose, because the base keeper plate's on. Now, what they found when they took this model apart was it was a manufacturing error, and the brass sprung pickups from the base plate to the circuit board were actually missing. They'd been missed out in production. So I purchased it off them for a reduced price, and I'm going to feature it on this video. Now, taking the body shell off, obviously this is in virtually new condition. And there's the motor, flywheel assembly, and the DCC socket on the back. So I'm just going to put it down like that. I do like this loco. I like the colour and I like the detail on this. I'm hoping this is going to be a nice runner when I'm done. I've had a Hornby radial tank which went back because it wasn't a good runner. Those steps go on there, so we'll put them back on later on. So anyway, as I was saying, this is missing some plunger pickups. So if I get a battery and test on the circuit board direct to the motor terminals, you can see the motor is spinning there. So it is indeed a runner. We've just got to figure out how to get the power from the track to the motor. Now the rear wheel has pickups on. These are wiper pickups, and the battery applied to these shows that the model runs, but that just leaves it with two wheel pickups, so that's not a lot of good. Removing a few screws, the DCC interface comes off, as does this circuit board, and there is the two holes where I'm just cleaning this excess oil off, where the plunger pickup should be, but they're not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach two pieces of wire to these brass strips in here, and I'm going to actually hardwire it and solder it together for a more reliable connection. I'll just clean all the grease off there. So I've got some of this TCS very thin wire, and I'm just going to tag solder it onto here so that it's got a good connection, making sure that I don't bridge any gaps to make sure there's no short circuits. Just a touch with the soldering iron. I've already tinned the wire, so just a small touch with the soldering iron secures the wires in place. That is when I can get it to line up properly. Just there we go. And that is the two pickup wires attached to this chassis keeper plate. He says, I'm just trying to get that flow. I'm conscious I don't want to get too much heat on it because I don't want to melt the plastic. So just going to give these pickups a quick wipe with a cotton bud of mess just to get any dust or fluff off them, as this has been in storage with me, oh God knows, probably for the best part of a year since I bought this. So now I'm going to turn the model upside down again, and I'm going to feed the two wires through the holes. The grease on the model is, I'm just looking at here with this cocktail stick. The grease is very, very good. It's not congealed or anything. But I am just going to add a tiny amount of oil to those brass bearings, as the axles looked a little bit dry, but the gearing was well lubricated. So the two wires, like I said, I'm feeding up through the holes there where the plungers were. And then it is quite a fiddly job to get this on. You have to make sure that those wiper pickups are in place behind the wheels. You don't want to bend them. So you've got to be very careful working with a cocktail stick just to nudge them behind the wheel rims. Don't force the chassis plate down, otherwise you could bend them. And the brass is very thin, so it would snap relatively easily. But it takes some fiddling about, but eventually I get the pickups in place, and then I push the keeper plate home. He says, let that one there, let that one right, so I had to do that again. But now it's on. I get one of those little screws that we found in the box and just tighten that down ever so slightly just to hold it in place. And then I get the other screw and replace that as well. And then turn the chassis around and just pull the wires through, and I will then attempt to solder them onto the PCB. So these really are tiny screws. So there we go, there's the two wires, and this is the PCB. Now, this is where I make a mistake on this model, and I've left it in to show you what not to do. Now, I put the PCB back. I've worked out and I've had a look. It's clearly marked M1 plus and M plus and M minus for motor, motor terminals on the PCB. Now, as you can see here, I am soldering that to the left-hand tabs. I'm going to solder it onto there. Now, this is incorrect. Do not follow this example. What I have done here is I'm going to cause myself a major headache. What I should do is solder it to the tabs to the right. So I'm soldering these on here. Sorry, it's gone out of focus a little bit. Now, what I've effectively done there is I have bypassed the DCC socket, but testing it, I'm not aware of it because those two terminals I've soldered on are direct to the motor. So thinking I've done a good job, I then screw the DCC interface back on and then give it a battery test. Well, of course it's going to work because I have linked the motor direct to the pickups on the wheels. Only the rear wheel pickups are now going through that DCC interface. So the model at least now is running, and it's a great improvement at the moment anyway as to what it was when we got it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit a DCC decoder, or I'm just putting a small amount of grease here through the hole in the top of the worm cover just to make sure there's plenty of lubrication. As like I said, this hasn't been run for the best part of a year, if not longer. And then I am going to append it. I've got some power applied via an old controller to the rear wheels, and I'm going to polish up the driving main wheels because they had suffered from oxidization while it had been in storage. So first off, I polish the wheels with a fiberglass pencil and then just take away the rest of the grime with a cotton bud and methylated spirits, not forgetting to do the wheel backs as well because they need to be clean for the pickups. And you can see there just a small amount of dirt is coming off each wheel, and this also aids in running the model in a bit. So now what I've done is I've put the decoder on. Now I test it with the rear wheels and everything's fine. Well, of course it would be because the power is going through the decoder at that point. If I had have tested it on the driving wheels, I may have realised there was a problem. Now, to fit a decoder, what you have to do, or how I found it easy, was to remove the removable coal load, unscrew a bracket that's in there, feed the decoder through the body shell as you put the body shell back on, and then there is a small cupboard inside the cab where a speaker should go, and unless you are DCC sound fitting these models, a small decoder like the Gauge Master one I've got here, or an AE Models one, will slide in there very nicely out the way, and then the removable coal load is put back on and you can't see it. So that's how you DCC fit these models, and that's exactly what I did. I even managed to screw this bracket thing back on to hold the decoder in place, and this is held in place with these two tiny screws. The coal load just clips back in, and then the water filler cap sits in two holes that are moulded. Opening up the detail pack, there's several things in here. First off being the NEM couplings. These will need to be placed on the front and rear of the model, and they just slide in the NEM sockets built into the front bogie. And then I'll put the rear one on. And then upending the loco again into my servicing cradle, I'm going to fit the brake rigging which very common with Hornby and Bachmann locos, just fits into the brake hangers using a small slot and a pinned method. And then there was also these tiny lifting lugs. Now, having a look on the instructions, these go on top of the water tanks. So using my needle nose pliers and a very, very tiny spot of super glue, I'm just going to put them in and hold them in place with the tweezer nose pliers. Now I'm just giving the model a test and all is looking good. The model looks absolutely lovely when it's running along. But because I only gave it a short test and the decoder didn't heat up, everything seemed okay. But when I put it on the layout, it blew straight away with 16 volts. So I had a look at it, and here you'll see the model is actually running without a DCC blanking plate. Now obviously it shouldn't do this, and I've realised the mistake. These wires here I've soldered direct to the motor terminals. They should have gone to those lugs on the right hand side there under that red and black wire. So I'd made the mistake and soldered the wires onto the wrong place. So now I've desoldered them and I've just got them on the track there with the battery to make sure there's no power getting through, which there isn't. And I'm now going to, that's the one where they were, and they should actually be on here where it says TR. So if I test this with a battery, you saw that was going to move then. So that is definitely the motor terminals, which is bizarre because those two brass parts on that PCB are directly above where the plunger pickups would be, which is why I thought they were pickups. But at least I've made the mistake, and if anybody else has to repair one of these, they're not going to do the same. So now that I soldered the pickup wires now to the track feed underneath the DCC interface, put it on the track, and it's a runner again with a blanking plate fitted. I'm going to take the blanking plate out, and if you remember before when I did this, it ran nothing, not a sausage. So hopefully now I've wired this up correctly. So I'm just going to push the wires down slowly there, and then I'm going to put it on the rolling road, and we're going to test the pickups. So it's running with a blanking plate, running rather nicely. Lift the model up, that proves that the rear wheel is picking up current. The model is still going. Lift up the rear wheel, although it does slow a little bit. There we go. So the rear wheel's not picking anything up. The front two wheels are. So everything's picking up as it should. Now I'm going to take the blanking plate out. Apply power and nothing. The model is dead. Just as it should be, even with the rear wheel. So now I am confident that the wiring is correct. And as soon as I put this blanking plate back in, I only have to balance it on it. And boom, the model kicks back into life. So that proves that everything now is going through that DCC interface. And I've now fitted an AE models decoder, and I'm going to let that run in for 30 minutes in each direction while it's on the rolling road. And I'm a little bit gutted. I've wasted 20 odd quid on a decoder because it blew, but we all make mistakes, and my mistake was getting the wrong lugs on this model. Now when I was running this in for the final sequence, another problem came across with this model, and that is there's no compensation in the drive wheels. So unless you have got dead straight, dead level tracklet, any slight gap will lift the drive wheels off and it just sits there spinning. That's the same problem with the Hornby one. They need some compensation on some of the drive wheels. If you've got an engine or anything you'd like to see featured on a future episode of Trash to Track, or if you need anything repaired, contact me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. We'll have a look at getting it sent over, and I'll have a look what I can do for you. I've got one more episode to go after this until the 100th episode, so get your questions or comments in below, and I'll have a look and address some of them in my 100 episode live stream that I plan to do. And for now, I'll leave the radial tank running in the garden. I may come back to this in the future, see if we can do something about those axles and get them compensated or sprung so that it doesn't keep bottoming out on an even track. But as for now, despite my mistake with the wiring, it's running lovely around the garden. Thank you for watching Trash to Track again. Please like, share and subscribe. And I will catch you all again in the next video. Bye for now.